So how about evidence for Jesus outside of the Bible? So the Bible is rich with evidence for Jesus, but is there any sort of extra biblical historical evidence for the person of Jesus that a person who's asking questions could say, okay, I feel a little bit better about exploring this more?
Yeah. That's such a good question. So in the Bible, we have 4 biographies of Jesus. We call them Gospels. And these are rich stories of Jesus' life, his birth, his death. But outside of the Bible, there are about, I think it's something like 14 different sources that are referring to Jesus' life or death. And some of them are Jewish sources, some of them are Roman sources. So they're coming from different places, which is, for history, that's actually pretty robust. We don't get that kind of corroboration that often with ancient historical figures. I think that maybe this question too is coming from a place of, in our culture right now, we're sort of generally questioning historical events. In general, we are suspicious about a lot of things. We're not sure what is truth. And so I think we're not as comfortable with resting with the historicity of some things. And I would say that Jesus is a real historical figure. Not many historians would actually question that. And that's because of the way we assemble historical evidence. It comes from a lot of different sources. And they're there for Jesus. How would you go about, I mean, you preach from the Bible and you preach from the Gospels. So I think there's a related question to this. How would you handle the idea of the historical reliability of the stories of Jesus?
Yeah, I think one of the claims about history is that winners write it.
Yeah.
Right? So the winners always write history. So who can trust a winner? Where's the loser's version of history? In some ways, the Bible plays out a little bit like that. We were talking a little bit earlier about how poorly the early church leaders, like the significant church leaders, Paul, certainly Peter, play out in the accounts. Like they just buffoons, the real putz. And then even some of the other pieces where putting somewhat, what was considered socially unreliable sources in critical roles, like women who are the first at the grave. It's like, man, if you want to establish a watertight case, certainly in an ancient Jewish court, call the first few people be women.
Yeah,
this is what I saw.
Sure.
But so those are strong affirmations for. This is a complete maybe deflect, and maybe we go to the next question. But one of the compelling pieces for me is a scholar, N.T. Wright, who wrote a thick, I think it's 800 pages. I got through most of it. The Resurrection of the Son of God, where he just plays through all the possible combinations, how this could have been that. Jesus would rise from the dead. And I guess that's the critical issue for me. The critical issue for me is the resurrection of Jesus true? Sadly for me, some of my colleagues think it's myth. It's legendish, and we're all resurrecting, we're all coming alive. And I don't think that was ever a Jewish option. I don't think that the disciples even considered that as a possibility. And you talked about them dying themselves, going to the grave, and letting their kids or their spouses die.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so what do we do around the resurrection, and then how does that play out in terms of the trustworthiness? I mean, we're getting off Christmas, but, one of the Gospels talks about there being one angel at the grave of Jesus, and the other one talks about there being 2 angels. And so that's it, can't trust this. Or you say, well, no, there were angels. Something there was there. The body wasn't there. Jesus showed up. There are some corroborating things. I work a little bit with the fire department, and I show up on the scene for with MVCs. There's a motor vehicle collision, and so this is 7 minutes after it's happened, and 2 people who were part of the same thing have different stories about how it happened. Though there's the mangled cars, and everybody agrees that something happened here, but exactly who did what, when, and how, it's a different story. And so again, there's this willingness of God to work with unschooled fishermen, with less than perfect humans.